Welcome, everyone, to this Cybersecurity Magazine podcast. Today, I'm joined by our new editor, Ana Koren, and we are talking to Alex Ooi, current CISO at DNB, about his experiences in cybersecurity and security for 5G. So thank you so much, Alex, for joining us today.
Yeah, and thank you, Philippa, for inviting me to speak on your podcast.
Could you please start by introducing yourself and your background in cybersecurity a little bit?
Yeah, I'm currently the CISO or the CISO for DNB. Prior to this, I was the CISO for what we call it the Singtel Group Networks, managing the networks infrastructure, which is basically the bread and butter of our telecommunication services across both Singtel and Optus. I've been in the industry, cybersecurity industry, for the last 20 years. Worked in prior to being in the end user space. I've been to, managing or providing managed security services, managing teams up to 200, basically cybersecurity specialists, right? So, and even prior to that, a pretty long background or in the areas of network operations and network engineering. Yeah.
Could you please explain a bit more about your role as CISO? So, primary responsibilities, strategic importance, and how it aligns with industry best practices for ensuring effective cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think specifically for my role in DNB as a CISO, I cover end to end. What I mean by end to end is in two aspects. One, I cover both the entire organization of DNB, which includes both the corporate space and also our 5G network infrastructure. From another aspect, my role also encompasses everything that's got to do with cybersecurity. That means I'm fully accountable for cybersecurity in DNB. And again, for those that are not familiar with DNB, it actually stands for Digital National Berhad. We are the wholesale network provider for 5G in Malaysia, for the entire Malaysia, right? In terms of scope, or my scope as a CISO is that, I cover everything from governance, compliance, risk management, assurance, engineering, operations, threat monitoring, threat management, and even down to architecture design when it comes to cybersecurity. It's not normal or not, a mainstream scope for CISO. Typically, CISOs of today or in most organizations are purely governance and compliance officers, right? They're not truly end to end when it comes to cybersecurity. I hope that answers your question, Ana.
Yeah.
It does, thank you. And that's something we've been looking at a lot in the last year at Cybersecurity Magazine, the different kind of jobs and careers that there are within cybersecurity. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about kind of what are some of the most challenging or some of the most enjoyable aspects of your role currently.
I think from a role perspective, because I do cover end to end, and what that means is that I'm not doing or performing a tick box function as a role from a compliance perspective. So there's a need for me to truly understand the business itself. And when I say the business itself, it means that the technology that we use and deploy from a 5G perspective, in the case of DNB. So and it's no different from applying security, be it in the utility space, be it in power and gas, where you're dealing with what I call as an OT set of technology, right? So the most challenging, I would say, is that applying a set of security solutions or set of security solutions into non-enterprise stack set of technology, right? So it's not a typical enterprise stack. So and that's challenging in the sense that whatever cybersecurity solutions that we use, because in today's world, most of the cybersecurity solutions are built basically for the enterprise stack. And now what we're trying to do is to apply it into I won't call it a non-enterprise stack, but it is not the traditional enterprise or corporate space, right? It's more into the 5G networks environment. And and the challenge is that, when we deploy such a solution, how do we ensure that it doesn't impact performance and also the what they call that, the reliability of the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to bear in mind that, telecommunications, or even let's say in the utility space, we are considered as critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
And what it means is that, for example, if a solution that we deploy impacts the performance or the availability of that particular
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure, it would have impact on, basically the consumers, right? So in our case is that if a 5G goes down, we would have, a huge number of, consumers unable to access, to basic telecommunication services.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's the same, for all, anyone that's doing cybersecurity in any of the CI space, especially the critical infrastructure space. In terms of where it's rewarding is that, we get to identify and build solutions with our principals to deploy them effectively into, what I call into the 5G network space. And it's an area that's not many telcos have yet ventured. Some of them have provided security into it, but what we're doing is doing a lot more. Trying to deploy many of the enterprise cybersecurity solutions into the 5G space. So, in a certain sense, what we're doing is pretty groundbreaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Solutions that have not yet been deployed or have not yet been, even seen in that particular 5G space. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting that you talk about how your role as CISO isn't just what is the highest security we can do, but also taking into account kind of the use of the network and making sure everyone can access it properly and it's reliable. Is that kind of something you enjoy, that part of like having to take into account, like you say, the values of every of the company and things like that as well? It's not just specifically looking at what is the most secure we can possibly make it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Philippa, because and that's where it's and you get this basic complaint or basic feedback from a lot of CISOs that they struggle to implement cybersecurity in their organization. I think the primary reason for that is because most CISOs don't understand how the business or the technology
Mm-hmm.
works, right? So it's not as simple as ticking a box and I just want to put a set of security tools
Yeah.
into a mission critical system, right? So you need to understand the business, understand the technology, and then look at how the security solutions can be adapted into that
Mm-hmm.
particular space, right? So I think you what you've just said is exactly
Yeah.
correct. And today, I think most CISOs should look at themselves rather than saying that the board doesn't support them, the rest of the stakeholders does not support them. I think they don't truly understand how the business has been operated, what are the technology that's been used, and then they struggle to communicate, how cybersecurity
Mm-hmm.
can be applicable and how it will not impact, right, the businesses that they're trying to protect.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're saying that communication is a large part of your role, communicating the security risks and what the solutions could be.
That is true. That's right,
Mm-hmm.
Philippa. Right, and it
Okay.
helps because I'm pretty technical, right, and
Mm-hmm.
most CISOs aren't, and therefore, you're dealing with a very, very technical. I mean, you can just imagine, right, and on a daily basis, we deal with our 5G engineering and operations team, and they're extremely technical, and you have to be at the level where you can actually communicate and engage with them, right, from a technical viewpoint.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of moving on a little bit now to looking at security of 5G networks more generally. Um, what kind of security issues specifically affect 5G networks? What are key issues?
I think if you compare 5G against 4G,
Mm-hmm.
4G is inherently not secure in the sense that the basic functions or the functionalities of 4G or the communications between 4G functions are not properly secured, be it in the form of authentication or be in the form of encryption. So 5G has actually addressed some of these limitations, right? They've incorporated, encryption between functions, right? Especially along the control plane and of course the user plane. They have also included in things like, authentication, right? Using digital certs. But having said that, there are still areas that, when it comes to 5G, we can improve upon, right? And what we do in DNB is look at the additional controls that we can put on top of what has been the, what I would call as the baseline security that's been put in place for 5G, right? And the aim, of course, is to prevent, eavesdropping, is to also prevent things like fake base stations, people trying to tap into your communications. And that's been predominantly the concerns when it comes to adopting, telecommunication services, right? So as 5G moves beyond the consumer space and you play in the enterprise space, which is what 5G is predominantly built for, the enterprise would expect, a certain level of, security to ensure confidentiality, integrity, right? Through encryption and authentication.
Yeah.
Yeah, so building off of that, can you outline your strategic approach to ensuring the security and integrity of a 5G network, considering its unique challenges?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'll take that in two areas. One is basically the baseline security system built into the 5G technology stack that's been defined by 3GPP. But beyond that, in DNB we have also identified a set of, I'll call it, principles or approaches that when we approach cybersecurity. The first is around governance and compliance. It's important to have in place a comprehensive set of governance and compliance framework, right, which addresses, which provides the transparency, right, to all stakeholders, right, especially when it comes to governance and compliance. And when I say stakeholders, it's both internal and external stakeholders. External being our regulators and various security organs of states. Internal would be, up to the board level, and of course the C-suites, right? And the next thing around governance and compliance is also to adopt industry best practices and standards, not limited to only local security standards, but international security standards as a practice, right? So whatever we do from a security requirements perspective, whatever standards that we deploy, whatever technology that we put in place, it needs to be aligned with best practices and standards that's recognized internationally. Another area that we looked into is what I call a secure by design. Whatever we design, as best as we can, is to build and integrate security or cybersecurity part of the overall solution. Our aim is not security should be fully integrated. It shouldn't be a bolt-on, and that's important from both technology integration viewpoint, right, and also from an operational viewpoint, right? Because anything that's bolt-on later on, you're going to face operational challenges in managing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next one would be what I would call as, zero trust approach, right? And zero trust comes in many, many forms, but the most important form is from an access control perspective, protecting and securing our access controls, access into our 5G infrastructure, right? Be it for our contractors, be it for our own staff. And secondly, to ensure that, there is no, connectivity between our corporate space and our 5G networks, right? Because the most common, cause of compromise for most OT's environment, correct, in the CI space is basically a compromised, system in the corporate space, and then the particular malware or threat actor will then move laterally into the OT space, right? So we made that decision to completely segregate both environments. There's no physical connectivity or any logical connectivity between the two spaces. And last but not least, we have also built a SOC, right, a Security Operations Center, which we call as Cyber Fusion Center. which provides 24/7 real-time threat monitoring and management. Of course, there's many other controls that we have put in place, but these are some of the basic building blocks that we've identified and we've already have in place, right, as we
Mhm.
move forward.
Thank you. You've given us a lot of kind of things to think about when it comes to 5G security. I'm interested, you mentioned zero trust. That's definitely something we hear a lot about here at Cybersecurity Magazine. And you just spoke about the kind of benefits it can bring, completely kind of splitting those systems, and the principles of it being kind of not allowing anything into your kind of security network. And yeah, you spoke a lot about the benefits. I was just wondering what kind of some of the challenges there are incorporating that into, for example, like 5G networks, and whether that brings any issues in the functionality, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it in the beginning it will, because access has become more stricter, right? So
Mm-hmm.
basically what zero trust means is that you should only get access to whatever resources that you need. If you don't need a particular resource or system or information or data, you should not have access to it. So there is that, I would call it, ongoing challenge of managing access, right, in the form of access matrix. That's
Mm-hmm.
more from a cybersecurity and access management perspective. But there's also a need for the operations team, the engineering team, from a larger perspective, beyond cyber, to adopt mindset that access will not be given if you don't need to have access to that particular system,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So in the past it was very easy, right? Without zero trust, an engineer could access everything in an environment. It's good, it gives the guy
Mm-hmm.
flexibility, right? But it also demonstrates a lack of, I would say, maturity, because in a matured operational environment, it should be very clear that a network engineer shouldn't be assessing a server
Mm-hmm.
resource or server system, all right? Let's say an operating system. So in a sense, if we move towards a more matured operational organization, right? Zero trust becomes less of a problem, right, when it comes to application and operations, right? But end of the day, it's all about maturity, right? What we're doing is maturing the organization, right? More from an access management perspective.
Okay, interesting. Kind of on that topic, how much cybersecurity is to do with the mindset and perhaps the awareness of the employees and the engineers?
I think communication is very important. We spend a lot of time communicating at every level to every stakeholder. Every meeting that we do is all about, communicating the need for a specific set of why we do something, or why are we
Mm-hmm.
implementing a specific process, procedure, or specific security control. Coming back to your question, there's no doubt that, uh, inherently cybersecurity can be a barrier, to operations when it comes to operating, right, to the rest of the organization, especially the key stakeholders, why cybersecurity is important, and also to explain that we're not there, right, to impede their work,
Mm-hmm.
and more importantly, we're there to secure what they're doing, right, from a long-term perspective. And for that to work, we need to explain to them, and it's also important for us to understand their challenges, and basically how things or the technology interoperate within the environment. So to me, it's a two-way thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell someone that you need to do that. You need to explain why and how we can help you. And I think the more important thing is that we need to understand their challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Um, just kind of moving on to something a little bit different. I was wondering what your thoughts were regarding private 5G security and how different this is to kind of what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think that's been the there's a lot of talk on private 5G, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's Um, and it's relevant because 5G is very much about the enterprise space, right? It's an enterprise play in technology, right? Of course, the consumers will get faster speed and all that, but the aim of
Hmm.
5G, especially with slicing technology and with the application of QoS, in terms of latency, the major play would be in the enterprise space, and to reduce basically latency, and also specifically in the areas where you do not have coverage for 5G. Basically,
Hmm.
you talk about, like, for example, plantations, mining, right, where you don't
Okay.
have the coverage when it comes to 5G. You need to deploy a 5G or private 5G. Now, a private 5G, when it comes to security, because a private 5G would, in some aspects, not will in some aspects have all the functions of a public 5G infrastructure, or if not, maybe specific functions of a public 5G infrastructure. But having said that, the baseline security, be it in private or public, a private 5G should have similar baseline securities as a public 5G network infrastructure,
Okay.
right? So that's the bottom line. But beyond that, a private 5G would also run what I would call, or what we all call, as edge compute capabilities, right? That means basically a compute stack, located at a private 5G. And this could be a public cloud or private cloud infrastructure. And therefore, if you have such a setup of an edge compute, then you've got to apply enterprise security controls, correct, across that entire stack.
Okay.
So what you have now is basically a combination of 5G security coupled with actually enterprise security running across that private 5G network infrastructure.
Okay. And do
Right.
you kind of see a challenge though with kind of enforcing certain private 5G networks to have this enterprise security as well?
There'll be a bit of a challenge because most private 5Gs would have connectivity back into a public 5G infrastructure.
Hmm.
So the baseline security is necessary to prevent, threats, coming into the public 5G infrastructure that we operate and run. Right,
Yeah.
that's the single aspects. I think the other challenge is that, for most enterprise CISOs would be the struggle to understand how would the private 5G security at the networks layer interoperate and integrate,
Hmm.
correct, with their enterprise tech security, right? So you're now trying to meld or merge, both worlds together, right?
Yeah.
5G network together with an enterprise compute space. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And how do you perceive the role of automation in enhancing cybersecurity, and what strategies can be implemented to effectively integrate automation in cybersecurity measures?
That's a very good question, Anna. Um, I think without doubt, automation or orchestration is important for a couple of reasons. The first reason is the shortage when it comes to expertise, right? So basically, automation and orchestration resolve some of the challenges that we will face, especially with the lack of expertise and resources.
Hmm.
The other challenge is the speed to response, to detect and response and mitigate threats. The attackers or the threat actors are definitely leveraging automated tools. Basically they're scanning our environments, they're using tools when they detect a compromise, to leverage and try to exploit that particular compromise. And therefore, from a defender perspective, we need to use this to any detected threats, right? When it comes to either managing that particular threat, and also responding and mitigating it. But without doubt, it's important. I think the biggest challenge is that the application of automation and orchestration has still a long way to go, and that's primarily due to the fact that you can't automate a process that's not matured enough, right? So automation and
Yeah.
orchestration can only be put in place when you have a matured, let's say, for example, cybersecurity incident response process, right? Or you have a matured set of run books or matured set of use cases, right? So again, it's not a silver bullet. Everyone thinks it is. All the principals sells it as a silver bullet, but you don't have the maturity when it comes to in the cybersecurity organization. You don't have the right set of skill sets to operate. Then automation and orchestration tools, for example, like the SAW tools, will not be impactful when you deploy them. Hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So is there a real problem then? I mean, with companies, industries not having a proper mature cybersecurity response team, or just mature like kind of attitudes towards cybersecurity?
I think it takes time to mature, right? And the challenge is that we continue to evolve, right? Cybersecurity doesn't stand still,
Yeah.
unfortunately, right? And it's unlike if you were managing a set of Cisco routers, right? And they haven't changed for the last 20 years. Right, so it continues to evolve. The threat actors continue to evolve. The threat types, the malwares continue to evolve. So, in a sense, it is a catching up game, right? And that's where the tools and the technology come into place. But from an organizational viewpoint, the people needs to mature, right? From a cybersecurity capability point of view, and also from a leadership point of view, setting the right directions and moving in the right directions and putting in the right set of investments, right, to ensure that progressive introduction of tools, people, to continue to keep up, right, with the threats out there. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's the crux of the matter. It's not an easy problem to fix, unfortunately, right? But having the right blend of technology, tools, and people will go a long way to addressing some of these issues. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just interested, do you have any advice for kind of leaders within cybersecurity at the moment, on how they can help build this maturity?
Yeah, I think there's a few points I could give on that. I think the first is that I think it's time for the industry and the leaders or security leaders in this industry to work together. I think that's important. To collaborate on areas that can be beneficial for all parties. Areas such as threat intelligence, sharing of threat intelligence, sharing of incidents, sharings of learnings, sharing of challenges in deploying certain set of security tools or security solutions, right? Certain organizations or principals or vendors are trying to do that, but I don't see that picking up, or I don't see that being picked up by enterprise CISOs, right? And I think many of the CISOs are very much inward looking into their own organization, right? And I think the ask is that for CISOs to reach out and try to work together and share capabilities. I think that's important in today's world where we just don't have enough expertise. We need to share our capabilities.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Alex. That seems like quite a nice place to end it as we've run out of time. But thank you so much for joining us today and discussing some of your experiences within cybersecurity.
And thank you, Philippa, Anna, right, for your time today too. Really appreciate it. Have a good day.
You too.